Hey there, people. So today I am bringing you my Brain of Cthulhu Expert Mode guide. This does include normal mode as well. I'll be covering the boss, how to spawn it, strategies for fighting it, armor, weapons, arena, other preparation. I'll show the actual boss fight and I'll cover drops at the end. Everything will be in that order. This is a detailed guide including the Bloody Spine boss summoning item and the Brain of Confusion Expert Treasure Bag drop. This will be suitable for expert but applicable for normal as well. As I mentioned, it's just less necessary to do so much preparation for normal mode, and I will explain differences between normal and expert and, if applicable, game versions during the course of the video. So also mentioning that I will include timestamps in the video description so that you'll be able to jump to a particular relevant part if you're interested in only a part of this. But let's first talk about the boss. The Brain of Cthulhu is, of course, a giant floating brain. It can teleport around to get closer to the player and so on. It spawns with 20 to 30 creepers, which are basically flying eyeballs, which will attack the player and move generally around the brain in range of the brain. They'll kind of surge towards the player and then back towards the brain usually, but you'll see that in action later. In expert mode, both the creepers and the brain itself can inflict several debuffs. I counted 7 that they can inflict on the player. The only debuff that they are immune to, however, is the confuse debuff, which would of course cause them to run away, so that makes sense. The brain itself cannot be harmed. It is invincible until all of the creepers are killed. Once those creepers are killed, it will split open, revealing a heart inside the brain, whatever you think of that. That's its second phase, its second stage, and at that point it will then try to ram the player by moving more quickly and teleporting towards the player, trying to get close to the player, trying to kill the player directly itself. In expert mode as well, at that point, once it gets into the second phase, it will start creating illusions, which are basically fake copies of itself. They will start out looking pretty faded, but as its health gets lower, those illusions will look more and more like the real brain. So the brain and its creepers in all modes, of course, are the only sources of tissue samples which you'll need for crafting the Crimson Armor, the Deathbringer Pickaxe, the Flesh Grinder Hammer, and the Meatball Flail. The Deathbringer Pickaxe is probably the most important of those. On PC, only for now, at least, defeating the Brain of Cthulhu or the Eater of Worlds, depending whether you're in a Corruption or Crimson world, will allow the Tavern Keep NPC to spawn to do with the old one's army. That event and that NPC may come to other platforms with further updates. So, in terms of actually spawning the boss will only spawn in the Crimson, and it will despawn if it's taken outside of the Corruption or the Crimson. It will not follow you outside of those biomes. If you happen to have Crimson close to Corruption, you can actually lure it into the Corruption if your world somehow has both. Some of my worlds, I use a custom generator to do that. So if you have both, it will still only spawn in the Crimson, but you can get it to come to the Corruption if it's close enough by. But outside of those two quote-unquote evil biomes, it will automatically leave, it will despawn. Normally it will spawn after breaking the 3rd Crimson Heart in the Underground Crimson. Those look a little bit like this one here. This is my pet Crimson Heart. It's a different thing, but they look a little bit like that. You'll find those, you'll find glowing Crimson Hearts underground, and breaking them on the 3rd one will spawn the boss, and every 3rd one after that. So if you have a lot of them, you can spawn the boss multiple times by doing that. The other way to spawn the boss is to use the Bloody Spine boss summoning item, which will only work in the Crimson because the boss only spawns in the Crimson, so it will simply not work if you're not in the Crimson biome. And the Bloody Spine boss summoning item is crafted from 15 vertebrae on all platforms at a demon or crimson altar. If you are on one of the updated platforms, in addition to the 15 vertebrae, you will also need 30 vicious powder. That powder is crafted from vicious mushrooms at a potion crafting station or an alchemy table. This is what a potion crafting station looks like. It doesn't have to be a workbench, but any flat surface furniture item with an empty bottle on it is considered a potion crafting station. That or an alchemy station that you get from the dungeon will work. 1 second there. Okay, so sorry, I had to do a little quick inventory management, but this is what the vicious powder looks like. Again, you craft that from vicious mushrooms. I've got a bunch of those here. It's 5 powder from 1 mushroom, so basically you're going to need 6 mushrooms to make 30 powder. And again, that happens right here at your potion crafting station. If I have this open because I have the ingredients in the chest, it'll give me that option. There we go. 5 vicious powder from 1 vicious mushroom. You're going to need 6 to get 30. And with that, I'm going to head over to the Crimson biome so that I can show you crafting the actual Bloody Spine and fighting the boss in arena and all that kind of stuff. So hold on one second. Okay, so here we are in the Crimson. I've just been following the little passage down here. And usually you will find these altars in here. You will find them other spots in the world, but that's what a Crimson altar looks like right there. You'll need to be by one of those to craft the Bloody Spine. So here we are, Bloody Spine, the 30 vicious powder, and 15 vertebrae. Again, if you're not on one of the updated platforms, you just need the vertebrae. Okay, so let's talk strategies. Piercing weapons are going to be very useful in the first stage of this boss fight to damage multiple creepers, because of course you're going to have all those flying creeper eyeballs flying around, and you're going to want to hit as many of them as you can at once. So piercing weapons are going to help you do that. So there's various things you can use, but we'll get into weapons specifically. The Brain is, we'll get into that in a moment. The Brain is the only boss in the game that's really susceptible to knockback, which means also high knockback weapons, such as spears, will also be very helpful. The Creeper and the Brain are susceptible to debuffs, except for, as I mentioned, the Confusion debuff. So weapons that inflict the on fire, in other words, light them on fire, or the Frostburn debuff will be very useful too. Scattering spiky balls and or throwing grenades around can actually be very useful. The spiky balls will basically lay on the floor, and anything that passes through them will get damaged. Grenades, of course, area effect is going to be particularly useful against those creepers. And yeah, anything that bounces around. If you're lucky enough to get a water bolt, you can actually just build yourself a closed box and just start firing water bolt projectiles inside of it. They'll bounce around, and anything, obviously the creepers or the Brain, they can pass through things. They will make their way into the box and immediately be very damaged. Again, the Brain is susceptible to knockbacks, so that can be quite effective too. Of course, that's only if you get the water bolt by the entrance of the dungeon. Also, let's see, the Slime Mount. Yeah, I do have the Slime Mount. Slime Mount can work well to avoid damage and cause some extra damage, because of course the Slime Mount bounces off of enemies, and so that will basically, you can bounce off of those creepers to avoid damage from them, the Brain itself as well, and you'll do damage to them, so Slime Mount can be quite useful there. In terms of armor, basically your base level is going to be iron, lead, or pumpkin armor. You can get away with that. That's possible to do, but it's recommended. I would say silver or tungsten would be kind of my recommended minimum. Obviously, anything better is going to be better. Gold, platinum, jungle armor, or meteor armor. I am wearing a full set of meteor armor, which is great. One of my favorites. And of course, after you break the first Crimson Heart, you can get a meteor to fall if you're lucky, or the next one, especially if you do them different nights. Third one, you're going to get the boss, but if you happen to get a meteor the first couple nights, by all means, you know, that's an option. If you happen to dive down into the jungle and get enough supplies for jungle armor, that's a good option too, especially if you're a magic user. In terms of weapons, the easiest option is to get a good bow, in my opinion. Either a platinum or tendon bow will do nicely. So I've got a tendon bow here. You can craft that with the crimtane you get from defeating the Eye of Cthulhu. And that's a great idea. It's a great bow. In my opinion, that's the easiest option. If you use Jester or Unholy arrows for the first phase, those will be very effective because, as mentioned, those are piercing. They'll go through multiple of those creepers and kill or destroy multiple creepers, damage at least. So the piercing effect is very good in the first phase, but in the second phase, or even in the first phase, flaming or frostburn arrows will do very well because both the creepers and the Brain are susceptible to those debuffs. particularly in the second phase. If you were using Jesters or Unholy, you'll want to switch probably to Flaming or Frostburn arrows. Other weapons that can be very useful, the Rotted Fork, because the brain itself is susceptible to knockback. That's mostly in the second phase where that's going to be particularly useful. It can stab through multiple creepers in the first phase, but the brain itself is invulnerable. So in the second phase, the brain's just flying at you. You can stab it with a good spear. The Rotted Fork is a very good option. Other spears can work well too, and those will basically keep it away from you. So it does get a little harder if you're in expert mode with it projecting the illusions. Also, swords can work well, especially fast swinging swords. I have an enchanted sword here. It can do okay. The Falcon Blade is particularly fast, can do very well as well. And as I mentioned, the Rotted Fork. So if you're a melee player, those are probably some of your best options. Anything that has good knockback or is very fast, or is fast enough to effectively have good knockback, is going to help keep that brain away from you and kill off those creepers faster. In terms of other weapons, the Mini Shark, because of course once you break that first Crimson Heart, you do get a gun. Usually you're supposed to. You get the Undertaker and some bullets, and that will allow your arms dealer to arrive if you have a free house, and then you can buy the Mini Shark, which is a much better gun than the Undertaker. The Undertaker's okay, but Mini Shark will do you better. The Space Gun, again, if you've got a meteor to fall, Space Gun especially with the meteor armor, so I'll show you that. I have that. It gets unlimited ammo. Free unlimited ammo if you have the full set of meteor armor, and it's also a piercing weapon, so obviously very good there. The Crimson Rod you can also get from breaking those Crimson Hearts. Basically creates a little cloud that rains, and if they pass through that cloud, the brain and or the creepers, obviously they're going to be flying around, passing through that cloud, getting damaged. Very useful. You basically just need to cast it and leave it there for a bit. You can switch to another weapon. Grenades, as mentioned, particularly in that first phase, will blow away a lot of those creepers. Magic staffs, I've got one here, the Ruby Staff. You can craft various magic staffs. They are also piercing weapons as well. Of course, you will need mana, so something like the Jungle Armor will help you there to boost your mana output. Speaking of going down into the jungle, I would think the Thorn Chakram, it's not mentioned on the wiki, but that ought to be pretty effective because of high damage, and it bounces around, so it could hit a lot of those creepers and so on. Any of the bee weapons that is mentioned, if you happen to fight the Queen Bee first, obviously bee nades are good against all of the pre-hard mode bosses. Any of the bee firing weapons will also make pretty short work. And also, especially if you're in expert mode, bone javelins actually can help because you have those illusions that the brain creates. So you need to be able to figure out which one's the real one. Bone javelins are one way of doing that. You can craft them from sturdy fossils, and they stick to the enemy that they hit. So you fire them. If they stick to it, it's the real one, and it's going to fly around and have that stuck to it for a while, so it'll help you identify that as well. So let's next talk accessories and buffs. Basically, any accessories that improve damage, defense, or mobility. So rocket boots will certainly be helpful if you happen to get the golden or the goblin army and get those from the goblin tinkerer before fighting the boss. Rocket boots will be great. Any of the things in a bottle, cloud in a bottle, tsunami in a bottle, sandstorm in a bottle, and so on. There's a few of them. I'm missing one right now. Any of those will do very well because they give you the double jump. You want both horizontal and vertical movement, so Hermes boots and so on will help with your horizontal movement. Rocket boots will help with your vertical movement. Cloud or whatever in a bottle will give you that double jump. So all of that will be helpful. Defense as well. Even a shackle will help. If you're on one of the updated platforms, Shark Tooth Necklace is always a great idea. No matter what weapon you're using, it makes your weapons more effective. But that is only available on the updated platform. So I've got Spectre boots, which are a combination of the horizontal movement boots. There's different recipes depending on which ones you have, but the running boots and the jumping boots, essentially, it combines them all. And I also have a pink horseshoe balloon, which is derived from, this is the fishing version, but you can make the various, combine a balloon with a double jump thing. And also with a, in this case, a lucky horseshoe. So there's various things you can combine if you have your Tinkerer's Workshop. Any of those individually or the combinations will be helpful. Band of Regeneration isn't that great, but it'll help. And also in expert mode, of course, the Shield of Cthulhu is going to be very helpful because that gives you that very useful dash ability, which also does some damage at the same time. So that's going to be very useful as well. Along with those accessories, you're going to want potions. You don't need potions at this stage of the game, but it will be helpful. So of course you want healing potions, whether lesser healing potions or regular if you can get them. All you need is some glowing mushrooms to combine with your regular healing or your lesser healing potions to get regular ones. Basic potions at this stage of the game, Iron Skin, Regeneration, and Swiftness are going to be useful. If you're planning on using a bow and arrow, archery potion is going to be helpful. I have shine potions just to help you guys see when I get to that stage. Any sort of food, I've got the bowl of soup for the well-fed buff. That well-fed buff is going to be helpful, especially in expert mode. And actually the hunter potion I brought along as well, because in that second stage in expert mode, it is supposed to show you where the enemies are, so it should show where the real Brain of Cthulhu is. So that might be very helpful if you're playing in expert mode. I'm actually just going to test it out at this point, and we'll see how that goes. So next we can talk about the arena. I'll show you what I've got set up. Basic principles of an arena are to have a series of horizontal platforms, and basically the idea is to have a bunch of long horizontal platforms that you can move across and jump between. Normally you can get away with simply a series of long platforms spaced out so that you can get between them. If you have a grappling hook, you don't have to have them as close together, because the grappling hook, like here, will allow me to quickly ascend that vertical space. I like to use stairs so that I don't have to think about moving up and down. I don't have to think, oh, I need to use my grappling hook. I don't need to think about, hey, I need to use my double jump or my rocket boots to get up there. See, I can do that, but these stairs, personally, I think that's easier. So that's up to you. You can even use ropes. Ropes maybe aren't that great, but but they can be helpful. The grappling hook can certainly come in quite useful in getting between more spaced out platforms. So all of that's your basic ideas as far as your arena. If you are breaking Crimson Hearts, which you normally would be the first time to summon the boss, you will want an escape route. I actually broke all of the ones in this area already, but you can imagine if my Crimson Heart is way down here, I'm going to want to have things set up so I can get up here very quickly when the boss spawns, because you don't want to be stuck in a chasm. You want to be in your sort of arena. And personally, you can build your arena outside. You can build it on the surface. You can build it above the surface. You don't want to go too high, because that will, again, be out of that biome and the boss will take off on you. Personally, for this boss, at least in particular, the Crimson does have a large cavernous area inside, so that's where I like to build my arena, as I've done here. So there we go. That's the basic ideas of the arena, and also you will want any other bonuses that you can get. A campfire is an easy one. You can just build that from wood and torches. So it's a good idea to put a campfire in the middle. It gives you a nice big radius. I can go all the way up to the top of my arena here. I've still got that campfire buff, so put it in the middle and you'll get that effect wherever you are in your arena. If you happen to have a heart lantern or a star in a bottle, those will obviously help as well. Heart lantern with your regeneration, star in a bottle if you're a magic user, or if you're using magic weapons with your mana, and anything else that you happen to have that will give you a boost as well. So I just realized I need a couple more things that I didn't bring with me, so I will start the boss fight in just a second when I run back and get those. Alright, so mostly I just wanted to get some grenades because I want to show you how those work. So without further ado, let's start this boss fight. I'm going to throw some grenades at these guys. You can tell actually where the boss actually is by where these guys go. Now you do have to be careful that... oh, and I got some crimtane ore in place of my grenades already. So I did also want to throw some of these around. Actually, not those. The spiky balls. So as you can see, basically, that as they pass through those, they're going to take some damage. And I want to show you, personally, I don't think the melee weapons are super powerful. I'm more of a ranged player generally. And it's worth noting, I think I mentioned this briefly, but these creepers, as well as the boss itself, will inflict a series of debuffs on you, and that can actually cause you a lot of pain, a lot of trouble. It'll mess you up if you're in expert mode only. Keep that in mind as well. So at this stage, I'm going to switch to my bow and arrow because I want to take these guys out, and I haven't been doing that well with the other approaches. So they will drop a fair number of these. Well, normally those would be hearts. It is still a Halloween event, so they're not the hearts yet. Okay, there we go. Recovery. Okay, so let's show you the space gun as well. Again, piercing effect would be quite useful there. There we go. We have our second stage. At this point, I'm going to want to swap my arrows. The frostburn arrows are going to be way more powerful. But I want to show you some of the other weapons while I'm at it as well. So, these staffs can be quite useful. Especially in the earlier stage with that piercing effect, if you're a magic user. Now at this point I am going to want to switch to my frostburn arrows personally, because that's also going to help me with identifying which one's the real one. Now this is a thing too, I think I had forgotten to use my buffs earlier. Yeah, and you can tell that's one of the bonuses of having this effect, that only the real one will have that that little frostburn debuff in place on it. So there you go. That's how you beat it. I'm tempted to do it again. Do you want to do it again? No, you know what? That's just going to take too much time. So those are some of the weapons that I personally recommend. I did bring along the Falcon Blade and the Rotted Fork as alternatives to whatever works for you, depending on your playstyle, your class, and so on. Those are some ideas. So let's talk about drops now. The Brain of Cthulhu always drops 5 to 15 lesser healing potions, 40 to 90 crimtane ore, and 30 to 50 tissue samples. I should have more than that because the creepers actually will drop crimtane ore and tissue samples as well. Or is it just the tissue samples? Anyway, yeah, I've got 251 ore, so yes, they definitely drop ore. And there's the tissue samples, so actually only 81 of those, even with all the creepers. So that's actually in the range of the boss itself. But it will always drop those. It has a 1 in 7 chance of dropping the Brain of Cthulhu mask, which I obviously did not get here. A 1 in 10 chance of dropping the Brain of Cthulhu trophy. On the updated platforms only, it has a 1 in 20 chance of dropping the Bone Rattle pet item, which is basically, well, it's a pet item, just like I have my little pet here. That's a light pet, so it would actually take the place of this other pet, the flying little guy I've got there. And the Bone Rattle summons a baby face monster pet. Now in expert mode, it always drops this treasure bag. So I've got the Brain of Cthulhu treasure bag here, and that always contains the Brain of Confusion item. It will also contain some other stuff. So let's see, I've got 81 of those and 251 of those. Bam. So I get another, you get some extra tissue samples and some extra ore in there as well. And you get this Brain of Cthulhu item. So you know what, let's actually go ahead and equip that. What it does is when you are damaged, when it's equipped, you have to equip it, and you're damaged, a floating brain will appear, which inflicts the confused debuff on nearby enemies. So the confused debuff, of course, is the one that basically causes enemies to run away from you. So it's a certain chance, I think it's something like 60% chance, that that'll make those enemies around you confused. And it's not considered a great item, but especially compared to the one that the Eater of Worlds drops in Corruption Worlds. But it can be useful against invasions and other swarms of enemies. So let's see if I can find some enemies just to show that off. There we go. See, there's that tiny floating brain, and now he's confused, and he's running away from me, and that's what it does. It's 3 to 5 seconds that it causes that to happen, and then they get over it and they come after you again. But if you're fighting an invasion or otherwise a large swarm of enemies, it can be useful. It's not great, whatever. Anyway, that's basically the video. So I hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.